Basil, please. What's up everyone? My name is Kelsey. Welcome back to my channel. Today we are doing my June wrap-up, so all the books I read in June. June was Pride Month and I participated in a couple of readathons. To be honest though, they kind of fell apart at the end of the month. So the first 2 weeks were pretty good and I stayed on track and went off my TBR. But at the end of the month, I got really caught up with school and work and it just like all fell apart and I had to read off my TBR for school and it was kind of a mess. But overall, it was a really good month as a whole. Let's see my stats. I read 9 books, a total of 1,707 pages. I listened to audiobooks for 15.5 hours. I'm surrounded by cats right now. But my average rating was 4.388, which is the highest it's been all year. That's like amazing for me. Usually my average is in the 3s. Yeah, it's been in the 3s for all the other months. Let's see, I read 1 anthology, 4 contemporary, 2 fantasy, 1 graphic novel, 1 historical, 1 sci-fi, 3 audio, 3 ebooks, 3 physical books, 2 adult, 1 new adult, and 6 YA. So, this cat. So a really good reading month as far as like quality goes. I'm recording this a little later than I usually do my wrap-ups. I usually try to get them like the first 2 weeks of the following month, but I don't know, I did a vlog at the beginning of the month and it just didn't work out. So I'm hoping I remember these books well enough to actually talk about them. I always take notes, but I was so busy that my notes are not great. So we'll see how this goes. Luckily, I mean, I obviously liked most of them, so hopefully they stuck around. All right, book 1 was Check Please, book 2, Sticks and Scones by Ngozi Ukazu. And this is a graphic novel. It's the second in the series, so I don't want to give away anything too big from the first, but it follows Eric Biddy, as he's attending Samuel University. So the first book follows his freshman and sophomore years at this university. He's a hockey player, but he was trained as like a figure skater, so he's figuring out how to do hockey and how to work with a team and getting along with his teammates, but he also bakes and he has a baking vlog that he does, and it's just really wholesome and sweet and heartwarming. There's a relationship between him and another guy on the hockey team, and there's so many friendships that are just so good. There's a bunch of hockey slang too, so if you like hockey, you'll probably like this, but even if you don't, you'll probably come out of this like wanting to know more about hockey. That's what happened to me. But yeah, hands down, 5 stars. It was a really great conclusion to the series. This is just like a comfort read. Okay, book 2 was This Is What It Feels Like by Rebecca Barrow. This was the group read for Queer Lit Readathon, I think. I read it as an ebook from my library. It's a young adult contemporary following 3 perspectives, and it takes place over the summer, and these 3 girls they used to be friends, really close friends, and they were in a band together. So this is the summer after they had a falling out and there's some sort of music competition and they consider getting the band back together. But in the process of doing that, there's a lot of tension between these characters and there's a lot of relationships that need to be healed and communication that needs to happen. So the 3 characters we have in this book are Dia, who is actually a teen mom. She has a daughter, and this takes place after their senior year, so they've just graduated. I really liked Dia's perspective. I really liked her as a character, and I really liked her relationship with her young daughter, and everything about her personality just made sense for what she's been through, because the father of her child, and this isn't a spoiler, it's revealed very quickly, died before she gave birth. So considering everything that's happened to her in the past, her character arc throughout this book makes a lot of sense, and I really enjoyed her. We also followed Jules, who is Dia's close friend, and they still talk to each other, and Jules is, I think she's a lesbian. I can't remember if it uses that word in the book, but she has a relationship with this other girl, Autumn, that she meets at her job, and I really enjoyed that relationship too. And then our last character is Hannah, who is sort of the reason for the falling out. She developed an alcohol problem and was an alcoholic and had to go to rehab to recover from this, and she did a lot of things when she was drinking that sort of caused a lot of problems in her friendships. So that's where all of this healing has to come from. And I just really liked this book. I liked the writing style. It was, I think I described it as like, it's very punchy. It's very like to the point kind of writing, and I think all the characters are great, and I loved the relationship between the 3 girls, and I gave it 5 stars. And I'm really glad this was the group pick, because I'm pretty sure I never would have picked this up if it hadn't been part of a readathon. Like, the synopsis by itself didn't do much for me, so I'm glad it came up this way. Book 3 was A Little Light Mischief by Cat Sebastian. This is a shorter novel. It's a little longer than a novella, I think. Novelette, maybe. It's an adult historical romance between 2 women. And I was nervous going into this because I generally don't like historical romance. And because this is such a short book, I don't want to say too much, but it follows 2 women. Alice, who is sort of a noblewoman in this house, and Molly, who is a housekeeper, and this sort of involves like their growing romantic relationship and Alice's resistance to it. Alice was kicked out of her home after some sort of scandal, and she's nervous about getting involved with people, especially women. And there's sort of a little mystery involving the housekeeper Molly, and then there's kind of a mini heist situation. So overall, it was like a really fun, cute, fluffy read. I can't say there was anything outstanding about it. There was like some good chemistry between the 2 characters, and it was like a slow building kind of romance. So I ended up giving this 4 stars. I liked it, but honestly, it's not super memorable. Okay, book 4 was The 4 Profound Weaves by RB Lemberg. This is an adult fantasy. I don't know if this is a novella. I think this is their first full-length novel. So it was pretty short for a novel, but I think it's full-length. This was an ARC. I read it as an ebook. It's set in a fantasy world, high fantasy world, where we follow 2 characters that are elderly, and they're both trans. And this sort of follows their 2 different journeys. One is a woman who has been training her whole life to do these weaves, which is a sort of magic system in this world. Her aunt was teaching her these weaves, and then her aunt disappeared, and she never got to learn the final weave. So she wants to find her aunt in order to learn this final weave and know all 4 of the weaves. And we follow this other man who is from a different culture than this woman. So him being trans isn't as accepted in his culture, but in her culture, where they are currently, it's totally normal to change yourself to match your insides, if that makes sense. And he is on this journey to find his name, because in this culture, names are very important, and they are how you manifest the magic that you have. So we follow these 2 characters who sort of team up together and go on this journey. Okay, so pros for this book are the writing is beautiful. There's a lot of like really lovely descriptions of things, and it's almost a lyrical style of writing where the author made the desert sound so pretty, and you could just like feel the wind and see the sand moving. It was just really lovely. The world is super elaborate. Like, you can tell a lot of world building went into this magic system, and these cultures were really well developed. I liked how it included both of these cultures, and they were so different from each other, but still kind of intertwined. My cons for this book are that the magic system and the world were really confusing, and the author just kind of throws you into it. There's not a lot of, there's almost no exposition in this book at all, which, if you're into really beautiful writing, that's a plus, but if you want a very well-established world, it's kind of difficult to get that without any exposition at all. So I ended up giving this 4 stars. Really beautiful, but confusing. All right, book 5 was Labyrinth Lost by Zoraida Córdova. This is a young adult fantasy, a portal fantasy of sorts, and I listened to this audiobook from my library. We follow Alex, who is a bruja, and she's reaching the age in her family where she has a death day, and that's like a day to, what's the word I'm looking for? Ground your magic in yourself. So Alex has shown signs of magic unbeknownst to her family. She has for years and has keeping it hidden. But now that they know, they want her to have this death day. But Alex is afraid. She doesn't want her magic. She wants to get rid of it. So she plans this sort of ritual to get rid of her magic. And instead of doing what it was intended to, her entire family is sent to this portal world. And she has to team up with this guy, Nova, who she doesn't really know, in order to rescue them and bring them home. Pros for this book. I really liked Alex as a protagonist. I thought her desires made a lot of sense. She's questioning, you know, if she really wants this magic and that connection to her family. And she's also dealing with this trauma from the disappearance of her father and some other things from her past that you learn about pretty quickly in the book. There's another character, Rishi, who is someone that Alex has a crush on in school, and she shows up in this portal world later in the book. So we have this sort of love triangle situation happening where we have like the stereotypical YA bad boy in Nova, and we have a female love interest in Rishi. And I kind of really liked that kind of subversion of the stereotypical YA love triangle going on. I really liked it. I also thought Nova was like pretty charming. I usually don't like teenage boys in books, but he was like so full of himself. It was just endearing instead of obnoxious. I really love the description of magic in this world, and in the portal world there's all kind of magical creatures and different landscapes, and I really like the way the author described all of that. And it's also, I think it was a really fast-paced book. I read some critiques that people thought it was not fast-paced, but maybe the audiobook helped with that. I got through it really quickly. My cons for this book are the romantic relationship was like underdeveloped. There's a lot of interactions between all three of the main characters, but it's not like they have alone time together. So it felt like we went really quickly from confessing feelings to being desperately in love. Like it just happened very quickly. And I also think Rishi as a character was underdeveloped too. Like I sincerely can't remember anything about Rishi's background or family at all, but I know plenty about Alex and Nova's backgrounds and family and childhoods and stuff. So it would have been nice to see more from Rishi. I gave it 4 stars. I did enjoy it. And I do want to read the next book. Okay, book 6 is Unbroken. Wait, no, that's the wrong one. Book 6 is Unbroken. 13 stories starring disabled teens. This is a young adult anthology. All of these stories have a disabled teenager. This book has like a variety of genres and a variety of genders and sexualities of the main characters, so I really enjoyed that aspect of it. There's also a variety of disabilities as well. There's invisible disabilities and physical disabilities and cognitive disabilities and neuroatypical. Is that right? Anyways, it just had a lot of different representation in a number of ways, and I liked that. Most of the stories I thought were just okay. This is a problem I always have with anthologies, but there were a couple of standouts that I really loved. So Brit and the Bite God was a contemporary that I gave 4.5 stars. Dear Nora James, You Know Nothing About Love, also 4.5 stars, and A Curse of Kindness, which I gave 4 stars. So overall, the average of everything ended up being 3.38 out of 5 stars. So, you know, I would just go into it with tempered expectations for some of the stories. I would still recommend it though. Okay, book 7, Sovereign by April Daniels. This is a young adult sci-fi. It's the second in this series. Let's see, what's the name of the series? Nemesis series. Book 1 is Dreadnought. So I guess I'll tell you about Dreadnought since I can't really say anything about this one. Dreadnought follows Danny, who is a trans girl. And one day, while she's at the mall, the famous superhero Dreadnought dies in front of her. And when Dreadnought dies, he passes on his powers to someone else. So he passes on his powers to Danny. And one of the side effects of these powers is sort of developing or your body changing into the ideal body for you. So Danny suddenly has the body and appearance of a teenage girl and is kind of forced out of the closet, so to speak. She can no longer hide that she's a trans girl. So in the first book, we're sort of following Danny as she's integrating as a superhero into the society, but also dealing with the fallout from her family. Her father is abusive and he does not accept that she's trans. She's also dealing with the fact that her best friend is kind of a misogynist, and she also has a crush on another girl. So there's a lot going on in poor Danny's life. But book 2 picks up where the first one left off. She's getting more into her superhero abilities and more of like the media side and how things look to the public. My pros for this are that I love Danny. I really do like her as a character, and especially in this book, I think she's come into her own so much more, and she's so much more assertive and confident in herself, but she's also dealing with a lot of anger from her past, and you know, trauma from some of the shit she's been through. I also think this book improved on the fight scenes from book one. Book one I actually only gave 3 stars, and this I ended up giving 4 stars, and it's really because of that. I liked Dani more as a character, and the fight scenes were much better. I thought the pacing in this book was much better too. Dani is like such a smartass, and I really like that about her. She's so sarcastic, and some of it is like pretty meta, like making references to like our world superhero tropes, things like that. So I really enjoyed this one. If you felt about book one and you weren't sure if you want to go on to book two, I recommend it. I think it was better. Oh wait, I forgot to say my cons. So my only cons for this book are that I think the secondary characters are a bit underdeveloped. Especially, there's one character that I cannot remember if they were in the first book, but I really liked them, and I liked their attitude, and I liked their interactions with the main character, and I wish they had been in it more, so. Okay, book 8 is The Black Flamingo by Dean Atta. This is a young adult contemporary novel in verse. I listened to the audiobook from my library. I really enjoy audiobooks for novels in verse. So this book follows Michael from the time he's a child until his college days. And it's sort of it's telling his whole life story and how he becomes a drag queen. I think the actual blurb is like a drag queen coming out story. And it just tells you about Michael with little cameos from his past to modern day. I really loved this book. I loved everything about it. The poetry itself was really beautiful. I loved all of the scenes that the author decided to include. They all tied together so well, and they all flowed one to the next so well. I also really enjoyed how he changed the voice of the character, because this is like a first-person perspective, and the voice of the character ages as he ages, and I really enjoyed that. So the language and structure at the beginning of the book is a little less sophisticated, and as time goes on, it gets more sophisticated and more evolved language and more self-aware. I have no cons for this. It's really a story about, self-discovery and being confident in yourself and knowing yourself. 5 stars. Okay, book 9. This is the last book I read, and it was Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds. This is another contemporary novel in verse, and another one I really enjoyed. Another one I listened to the audiobook. I read this one for my class. It was in the poetry section. It follows our main character, Will, the day after his brother is shot in the street and dies, and Will decides to follow these rules that have been set out for him. So the rules are, what are the rules? Don't cry. I'm gonna have to look it up. I only remember. It's fine. Okay, I found it. No crying, no snitching, always get revenge. So the day after his brother is murdered, he sets out to follow rule number 3 and get revenge on the person he believes shot his brother. He takes his brother's gun and leaves his apartment and gets in the elevator, and our story sort of starts when he's on the elevator. At every floor on his way down, someone new from his past gets on the elevator. People from his past who have died. And they all have something new to say and influence Will's decision on whether or not he's going to go through with this. So clearly Will is grieving and angry about his brother's death, and Jason Reynolds does an amazing job portraying that. I also think he did an amazing job with each character that gets on the elevator. They feel so real, and this book is very short. The audiobook is only, I think it's less than 2 hours long, and it's amazing how he manages to give all of those characters so much history and so much personality in just a few lines. Let's see, I also really think this format works well for this book, and the way Jason Reynolds writes, at least this verse poetry, the lines are very short, it's very quick, and it makes you feel that urgency of the situation, because the entire book takes place within just a couple minutes going down the elevator. So it's a very tense situation, and I think that the poetry and the way Jason Reynolds narrates it really adds to that. And the book also, I gotta stop saying also, I've said it like 8 times now. It discusses this sort of like cyclical violence and neighborhood violence that happens over years and years, and the history of that violence and how it perpetuates itself. And the last line of this book like gave me actual chills, and I just loved it. Like one of the best novels in verse I've ever read. I mean, I'm not super well read in this genre, but it was amazing. I gave it 5 stars. Actually, since I read this, it'll be in my next wrap up, but I also read The Boy in the Black Suit by Jason Reynolds, which I also loved, and Jason Reynolds is on my to read list as an author because I just really love his writing, apparently. Okay, those are all the books I read in June. That actually did not take as long as I expected it to. I'm just talking really fast today, I guess. So sorry for anyone listening to this on double speed. I post book-related videos every Wednesday, so if you want to see more, subscribe. If you want to keep talking, you can find me on Twitter or Instagram at Kelsey Reads or Goodreads at Kelsey Lynn Reads. I'm forgetting something. Oh, let me know if you read any of these in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think of them. Obviously, I enjoyed all of these. So hopefully you did too. What else do I say at the end of my videos? If you like this video, hit like. Otherwise, I'll see you next week.